Okay, so now we're ready to make our second effects map. And this is going to drive our magma, that sort of lava lampy looking effect, that happens behind the crust. So, the stuff that's happening in here. Um, let's make this grayscale. For this, we're actually going to use one of the shapes. So let's right click, edit effects map. And it's going to be the same basic idea as we had with the other one. So I'm just going to hit spacebar quadrant, and it's just going to make this chain for me. And for my pattern, I'm actually going to use Gaussian. The other thing we're going to do with this guy, and we might as well do it now, is we're going to add an iterate node. And again, you're putting the second input. This is for a pass-through. And we're going to set this one as the root. And let's bump this up to 8. Or whatever number you want. I bumped it up to 8. So we're back at our final quadrant here. And we're going to do a pattern offset. We're going to do a size offset. We're not going to bother with rotation because I'm keeping them round, so there's no point in rotating them. And the pattern size is also going to be, it's actually, why don't we just keep it the same thing that we did the last time, just simplify life. In which case we can come back to our other effects node. Now it's only going to let you have one of these effects maps up at a time, so it's always important to remember to make sure you're in the correct effects map. I'm going to hit this. I'm just going to use exactly this same formula. So I'm going to save some time. I'm going to come back here, highlight, right click. Now we're going back into this effects map. And for my pattern size, I'm just going to go ahead and make an empty function and paste that other one in here. When you paste it, you do have to reassign the output node though. So that's that one done. So the sizes are now different. They're all piled up on top of each other, so you can't really see what's going on. But they are different sizes. Right, so that's our size. Now, the pattern offset is where we're going to be getting our animation. So this is a float 2. We've already made our input parameter for our magma speed, which is what we're going to be using now. So we can go ahead and make an empty function here and commence to editing this one. Again, we're going to be working off randoms. So I'm going to just get a couple of nodes here and start randomizing. This is also going to be a float 2. So we are going to need a vector float 2 and set that as our output node, because whatever our output's going to be, it has to be a float 2. Now we can start to offset. So now it's started to offset it on the X, but not on the Y because there's nothing in there. Now we're going to, if we use the same number for the Y, you get this diagonal effect because they are always in exact relationship to each other. If you want it not to do this, you're going to have to use a second random number. They can, they're both between 0 and 1, and then you use one for the X and one for the Y. So we've got this random setup. This looks pretty good. It's got a couple of high points, but it's for the most part pretty mushy, which is what I want. I mean, it's that magma thing, but it's static. So now we have to add in an animation, and to do that, obviously we're going to need a couple of variables. So we know we're going to need time because it's an animation and that will always have time. And then we're using our magma speed to work with our time. Now, just like we did with the crust speed, I'm going to go ahead and put in that extra multiplication here and multiply by 0.01, just like we did the other one. And if we find that's too slow, we can come back in and change it. But you know, it's lava, it's not water. It moves slow. So it looks kind of weird once it starts moving too fast. And by doing it this way, it's just a lot easier to manipulate. We could copy this and paste it again, except this time we are multiplying it by time. So this is the sort of the engine that's going to drive our animation. Now, in order to attach it to here, we've got this all randomized. So basically, all we really need to do is multiply each one of these numbers by whatever the timer is doing. So we can hook this up. Like that. And then replace these. Now you notice what's happening here. All of a sudden, this has set itself back to 0. We know it's randomized. And the reason it's done that is because this timer is currently set to 0. And all we're doing is multiplying stuff. And if you multiply a number by 0, it's 0. So if we publish this out now and take a look at it, it works. Let's open up Lava 2. Oh, you know what we forgot to do? We forgot to set this as our output because we're looking at the other effects map right now. So let's redo that and see what the results are. Oh, you know what? What did I do wrong? It should be why isn't it moving? Oh, you know what? Because we set that really slow and we forgot to we've got this set down really, really low, and we changed that multiplier. So there we go. It's moving, but what you'll notice is that we kind of missed that. It starts here, right? That's kind of nasty looking. And then it slowly moves off of that. So I don't want it to stay, you know, especially if it's moving slow like this, that's ugly. So we're going to have to do one more thing to make this actually not start at 0. And that's pretty easy. We're just going to add another random number to it. Because unlike multiplication, if you also subtract a number, I suppose, because you can add a number to 0 and not have that result be 0. And now if we replace this with this new number added to it, it starts offset. So basically what you're doing is you're adding an extra thing here that just each one of these timers is just going to start from a different spot, whereas right now you're telling them to start from the same spot. By adding this, you're telling each one start from a different spot. And if we publish this out now, when we refresh it, it's actually going to start from a random position. We have to change our default to be something reasonable, but there we go. So that's our magma moving around, at least the basic engine of our magma moving around. And we can start working on that now. So let me pull up my notes here. Okay. Yeah, I had to took a second to pull up my notes. All right. This is kind of sharp. It's a lot of, I want it more sort of uniformly gray. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a levels node and kind of sort that out. This is, we're going to be putting this into a gradient map. And I don't want it to be like really sharp. I don't really want any black. See, the blacks, we're going to be using the same gradient map for this, as we are for this. So I want to reserve my black areas for my crust. So I really, since I'm only dealing with the magma here, I really don't want any of this color in here. So I'm going to have to get rid of that. The other way I'm going to do this is I'm going to add a blur in here as well. And that's going to help. Let's bring that up a bit. It's a little too much. And start bringing it down. So we get a more sort of gentle undulation. And then we can come back to our levels node once we get that undulation the way we want it, and just sort of really cut out the completely dark areas so that we're really only dealing with the lighter grays. And then this way we can save in our gradient map once we start making our colors. We know that we have, this black will be our crusty colors, and it gives us two zones really to work with. The next thing we're going to do, so this effects map has its own movement. I also want to add a little bit extra with a pixel processor because I want to set it to rotating as well. So I'm going to set the output here to grayscale, and I'm going to click down here to edit my pixel processor. Now this is my first time doing a demo with the latest 2017 version of Substance. And when I was putting together this material, I found this brand new rotate position node, which I am totally digging. You will notice it has a lot more functionality than the old rotate position node, and we're going to use all that new functionality to our advantage. Yeah, it makes it a lot easier to do stuff. It's cool. The position stays a position, so we're going to add a variable get float2 and put our position in here. And then seeing as how it's a pixel processor, it will absolutely need a sampler, which we're going to set as our output node. The angle is where, just like with the old rotate position node, is where you're going to get your animation from. So we'll work on that last. The scale, this is the part I love. This is going to tile it for you. So you can actually set in, I'm going to use a constant, but you could just as easily use a variable. And I'm going to use the number I came up with from my notes, and I came up with 2.6. So if you want, you could put a variable in here and have this the tiling of whatever image you're passing through here. You can now adjust that tiling using this scale node, or connector rather. And the last one, it's pretty sort of explanatory. It's the center point of your rotation. So I'm going to get a constant float2. This actually really simplifies it because you can actually determine right here with this one node where you want your rotation to be. So I'm setting it to 0, 0, so I want it to rotate from the middle. I'm digging this. This really simplifies life. So the only thing we now really need to address for this pixel processor is the actual angle, which is our animation. So again, we've done this a gajillion times before. We're going to get multiplications, and then we're going to need our variables. So we're going to get two float ones. So one of them is our time, And now we're dealing with magma speed. So the other one is going to be our magma speed. And since we already know we're going to need to slow this down, so copy this, make another one, and get another constant. And we'll put our 0.01 in here. And do this slow down before it hits our timer. And that's our angle. So this is it. This is just going to rotate what is coming out of this effects map according to whatever the magma speed is. So these two speeds are synced up since they're using the same variable. You can have, I mean, if you want to play around with your numbers, you can come in here and sort of tweak it so that you can make this constant a little bit different. I'm not. And that is what I'm going to use for kind of that lava lamp effect. And now it's really a question of hooking this up with this one and then plugging that into our gradient map. I think before we hook them up together, I think I want to kind of build my colors a little bit separately and deal with my crusty areas and my magma areas as two separate issues before I bring them together into one image. Because we've already sort of set up our zones. We know that this black area down here is going to correspond to whatever is happening in our crust color-wise. And then all the stuff up here is going to move up into the magma areas. So by making sure that we really don't have any black in here, I've already kind of split it up into those two zones. I'm just, you can go ahead and use the pick gradient tool. I'm going to just make this by hand because I think in the end it's going to be easier. But this I want actually really dark. So I'm going to come down into blacks in here, and I'm going to start my color up in here, and then get another. So I'm just kind of building up a little bit of variation in here, maybe pull in a little bit of dark orange and get another one. That's kind of nasty. And then maybe get another red black. So that looks pretty good. And up here we know we want like a really light yellow. And in here I think I want an orangey color. Now remember, when you it's a little too light. When you have these far apart, you've got this really sort of smooth gradient. So you're going to get a smooth gradient in your image. If you bring these close together, you're going to get more of a line. Now, I'm guesstimating where the line is going to be for my quote-unquote shoreline between the crusty areas and the magma. Again, this is all going to get adjusted later on. I'm just kind of putting in the broad strokes. And we can start, oh, no, didn't want that. We can start to sort of lighten up and brighten up our colors as we move away from the crust. That's probably right. Let's see. So this is going to be the sort of magma areas. Looks reasonable. I mean, it's wrong, but it's close enough. And let's take a look and see what happens with our crust areas. I just want to make sure I'm getting my zones done. And I am. I'm looking to see that I've got a clear delineation between this sort of intermediate floaty stuff and the really hot areas. And I also want to see that I'm getting a decent delineation between my my crust and my magma. Now I'm looking here. I'm not going to address it right now, but these areas in here, I'm going to eventually want to see more red here. And that's going to happen between a combination of moving this stuff around and then also going back into our original maps. But for the moment, this is good enough for actually getting these things combined. Now, I don't want this magma to kind of override what's happening with this very subtle stuff, these kind of floaty cracks. So I want to make a separate mask that's going to just block out these very, very highlighted areas. And we're going to do that by getting a levels node and coming into this original map that we're getting out of, the one that we corrected, that's coming out from our first effects map. And I'm going to go ahead and correct for, no, none of that. We're trying to get just that white. So I'm getting rid of as much stuff as I can that's not that highlight. And that looks pretty good. And what we can do now is then get another blend node and apply that magma to the areas. Actually, I want to see more of it, a little bit more under there. So I think I'm going to spread this out ever so slightly, if I can find that. I seem to have lost my mid node. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I think that'll be, I'm seeing some grays in there. That's really what I want. So I'm going to get some partial stuff here, but only just very slightly. That's probably good enough. So let's see what that looks like combined. Yeah, so we're starting to get some variation. I mean, the colors are all wrong, but our zones are good. So that's that map combined. Let's take a look and see what that looks like so far, and whether or not we're getting any closer to our end result. So we'll refresh it. All right. It's starting to look a bit more like it's supposed to be looking. These little guys are spinning around. We can always up the resolution a little bit more in here. Now don't forget, we've still got the, I mean, this is not as performant as it's going to be because we're still using those original, so it's pretty laggy right now. We're still using those originals, and clearly the colors aren't right, but the animation seems to be working correctly. And both of our, what is it doing? I'm going to bring, it's just being stupid right now. I'm going to bring this back down again. So let's just make sure our stuff works. So we can see that magma speed is quick now. You see, so that's working, it's speeding up. And then our crust speed, we can also adjust with that one. So everything's functioning now. It's just a question of getting rid of some of these nasty colors and start working on some of the other maps that we need to do, but as far as the engine of it, we've pretty much got it sewn up. So in the next video, what we're going to do is, I'm pretty contented with the shapes now the way they are, so we're going to go ahead and convert these into bitmaps in the next video, and then go ahead and actually finalize our material.